Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Mark Wollner. I'm the Executive Director of the Indiana Bond Bank, and we are so thrilled that you decided to join us for the 2023 Fuel Budgeting Program webinar. It's coming up soon, and it's just a pleasure to kick you off, or kick this webinar off. I don't want to kick anybody else off the call here, but as we move forward here, our mission at the Indiana Bond Bank really is to provide targeted financial solutions to local units of government in Indiana. If you haven't worked with us before, that's what we do. We are here to serve you, and the fuel budgeting program is one of those that we do for communities, units of government, schools, cities and towns in Indiana. The team who does that, you'll have 3 of the 5 of us here on the webinar today. Again, this is Mark Wollner. I have the pleasure of serving as the director, and you'll meet Brian Carmen, our Director of Marketing and Business Development today, and Ron Mangus, who many of you know on the line, our Director of Operations. So both have a chance to hear from the Bond Bank team today, as well as some assorted professionals who work on the fuel budgeting program. So let's jump in. Again, many of you may be unfamiliar with the Indiana Bond Bank as a whole. So just big picture before we dive into fuel. Just a quick overview, and just want to point out maybe a couple of things as you're thinking about from your seat, whether you're in a school district or whether the financial officer at a city or a town. Bond Bank can do a lot of different things. And so I think about the equipment lease purchase program. We just recently helped the city pay for and bring on a new garbage truck for about $200,000. The Community Funding Resource Program, which is a bonding program up to 10 years of financing. We recently closed with a county to help them bring on 200 acres, acquire 200 acres of land for a new regional park project for about $2 million. And so that was really exciting to help that public project along. Our advanced funding programs, that cash flow program, where we really help units of government bridge cash flow gaps, where your bills may be coming regularly and those revenue streams, as you know, come twice a year. And so helping kind of flatten that curve out. And we've helped a number of schools with that. And then finally, on that construction side, think about, we just helped a conservancy district replace old water lines and create a new treatment facility where the prior one had existed for many, many years past its useful life. And so just generally, the Bond Bank as a whole works in a number of ways across Indiana local units of government. And we are so pleased to be talking today about the fuel budgeting program, which is another niche program that you really can't find anywhere across the state of Indiana. And so we will be working today on what we call Vin Diesel's favorite program in Indiana state government. It's the fuel budgeting program. As fuel prices have risen fast and furious, so to speak, we're hoping to give you some resources to capture and protect yourself from that. So congratulations on being here to talk about risk management. Laid out just a real brief agenda. If you're a Simon Sinek fan, really start with why. And we talk about the what and the how to participate in our program. It's really, we believe we are providing the preeminent tool to really manage risk in a fuel budget. And we've done so since 2009, and we've really got a great program and a great set of professionals who monitor the market and work with our communities, our cities, and our schools, and every unit of government who wants to participate to protect their budget from volatility in fuel prices. So to tell you more about the fuel budgeting program, to really get us started, I'm going to turn it over to Brian Carmen, our Director of Marketing and Business Development. And Brian, if you get into the program, will kind of be your front door to the program, your first kind of friendly face. And similar on this webinar, Brian, I hope you take it from here and walk us through what folks need to know about what the fuel budgeting program is.
Yeah, hi everyone. So most, if not all of you, are here because you are responsible for setting and managing the fuel budget for your municipality. And when it comes down to it, 2 primary factors will drive that budget projection for next year. The first being the amount of projected consumption, and the second being the cost of that projected consumption. Now, the first side of that equation should be a bit more straightforward, unless you are anticipating some significant changes to your operations, whether it be an expansion of a fire territory or a reduction in school bus routes, most likely your historical consumption is a pretty good indicator of what next year's will be. The other side of that equation, how much that level of consumption is going to cost you, is for many reasons just a lot more difficult to predict, right? And we'll discuss why that is the case a little bit later on in our market analysis. But just take the last 2 years, for example, even 2020, 2021, and then 2022. We've seen polar opposites of prices in regards to high or low and just kind of flip over the years. And that's really where our fuel budgeting program comes in to help, to offer some sort of protection to that less predictable side of the equation. Along the lines of that set it and forget it mentality, the goal of the program is to allow you to set your budget with confidence. So with that said, you may already be getting a sense that we at the Bond Bank are not here to sell you the physical commodity of fuel, which would be correct. But to give you a high-level view of what the fuel budgeting program is and what it does offer, in its most simplest terms, it is a financial risk management tool that acts very similar to an insurance policy. So, for example, where your homeowner's insurance will protect you from out-of-pocket expenses against unforeseen events like a house fire, the fuel budgeting program protects your budget against swings in the fuel market. It's a program that we have offered at the Indiana Bond Bank since 2009, now having protected over 30 million gallons of diesel and unleaded fuel. And in a few moments, I will introduce Ron to explain just how the program offers that protection. But I also want to mention some of the more auxiliary benefits that do come with the program. Having offered the program for so long has enabled the Indiana Bond Bank to build a team of professionals around the program that offer expertise in a variety of areas, including finance, legal processes, and fuel market analysis. And through participation in this program, these professionals are available at your disposal. And then finally, going through the Indiana Bond Bank for this type of service is going to offer you cost efficiencies that you would not otherwise have available. And with a more the merrier type of approach, the Indiana Bond Bank is able to pool entities to share total costs rather than having to incur them individually. So again, in just a moment, I'm going to turn it over to Ron to explain the how of the program. But to reiterate the what, the fuel budgeting program is a risk management tool that allows you to manage the price volatility. And just to be perfectly clear, the intended purpose of the fuel budgeting program is not to serve as an alternative mechanism as to how, where, or when you purchase that physical commodity of fuel. That will remain and should remain the same for you. It is also not intended to be an expected source of ongoing revenue generation. So just as in an insurance policy would not be taken out for the purpose of revenue generation, participation in the fuel budgeting program should also not be predicated on that as well. And so it kind of hammered down the what of the program quite a bit. And so now I'm sure you are wondering how exactly this program offers protection for your fuel budget. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron Mangus to talk about the structure of the program.
Good afternoon. As Brian mentioned, my name is Ron Mangus. I'm Director of Operations for the Indiana Bond Bank. And I'm going to briefly describe how a collar works. There are several tools in the toolbox, but the collar is the one that most likely is the one how we're going to provide protection for your fuel. So with that, there are several lines on this graph. So let's start with the one that goes up and down and varies, and that is the market price of fuel. So it starts on the left in January, just below 375, goes up to 375 and goes down. And that just shows that fuel can vary. The second is the line at 350, and that is what I will call a cap or ceiling. And that is something that we work with counterparties to set depending on market conditions. And keep in mind, this is an example. We don't know what prices will be when we set the collar. And then if you look at the bottom, there's what I will call a floor at 275. And again, this is just an example. So in the month of January, you can see that the price is above. So what the bond bank will do is pay that difference between 350 and we'll say 370. And that is depending on how many gallons you have participating in the program. So if you have $1,000 or 1,000 gallons, excuse me, in the program, and it's 20 cents above, then we're going to pay you 1,000 times 20 cents or $200. If you move along the way, then that'll provide you protection in February and March of the same example. But you notice it goes below and it's between the cap or ceiling and the floor. In that transaction, nothing happens. There's no transaction. There's no money going from the bond bank to the entity. Whereas in January, we're providing you protection. The price of fuel went up, we're providing you protection. In May, it goes back up, and then we will provide you small protection. Conversely, if you go down to August and you notice that it's below, and let's just say that is 10 cents below, and it's at 265. Here is where it shifts in the collar structure. The price is 275, but it went to 265. You have 10 cents below and 1,000 gallons in the program. You're going to pay the bond bank $100. Now, keep in mind, you're paying less for gas too. So again, it still remains this budget protection program. It's just the opposite is happening as in January, February, and also between April and May. So in the program, each month is a settlement. Depending on how many gallons you participate in the program, and there's an application process that determines how many gallons are in the program, we will provide you a settlement. We will let you know where the price settles, and it's against what's called NYMEX, New York Mercantile Exchange, and it's just how gasoline or diesel, those are the two commodities in the program, trade. So Brian, if you can move to the next slide, it shows you a different illustration of what I just explained, the same thing. And we can walk through a monthly settlement. Example here is 275 is the floor, 350 is the cap, and 368 is where it settled, where NYMEX settled, let's just say for the month of January. So you have 3,000 or 1,950 gallons in. You can see that down here. If you 3,000 in, you participate at 65%. There's an 18 cents difference, and the bond bank provides you $351 in protection. Conversely, in example 3, and we'll do example 2 last, 275 is the floor, and the price fell to 255. Again, you have 1,950, or you participate with 3,000, 65% of your gallons, 3,000 gallons is 1,950, and 20 cents a gallon, you're going to pay the bond bank $390. So that is the opposite of what happens if the price goes down. But keep in mind, you're paying less for fuel as well. Finally, example 2, and I know I went out of order here, the price settled at $3 that month. Nothing happens, it's within. There's no check to the bond bank, and the bond bank is not writing you a check. So walk through kind of the settlement of this collar structure, and the bond bank will keep you advised every month of what happens, January, February, all the way through to December. We'll send you a letter, what happens with an email. We'll provide you kind of a graph that shows what the price does and keep you up to date. But keep in mind, whether the price goes up or the price goes down below the floor, we are providing you protection and protecting your budget. Next slide. So all things considered, hold on, I apologize. One thing, I changed my view. All things considered, the bond bank is providing you protection for the fuel program. So just wanted to provide you a couple things here. If you have any questions on how how this works, we'll be happy to come and provide you a more detailed explanation. And the second part of that is reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. Next slide, Brian. At this time, I'd like to introduce the external bond bank fuel budgeting team. First of all, John Maverick is with Energy Consulting. His resume is on the screen and he will be presenting the market update. Also with him is Russ Pollack, and he'll be here to answer any questions. And Dennis Otten is a partner of Bose, McKinney and Evans, and he is a partner with the firm. He is the one who's going to handle the legal documentation. Now keep in mind, the legal documentation is provided as part of the participation in this program. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to John, and he's going to provide a market analysis of the fuel program.
Thanks, Ron. I encourage everybody to write down your questions. Hopefully we have a stimulating question and answer period at the end. If we go to the next slide, Brian. So I'm just going to start out with, this is what it looked like in the past. So it's that old saying, you know, past performance is not guaranteed to happen in the future, et cetera, et cetera. But this is a combination between the diesel and the gasoline in this year's program for 2022. And as you can see, you know, Brian referred to this as insurance. And if you want to use that analogy here, you see the red line where that cap is for participants in the program this year, the green line, what the market has done. And you can see, to use that insurance analogy, the house did burn down. So it's never really happy, right? I mean, this is a great example of how the program is working. Participants in the program are getting a check each month. They're able to apply that check to their budget. And so it's a very simple way to see that it's working. I will say we always wish, though, that the market is going down, because in the next few slides, you'll see that the picture, the house is still burning out there, right? And now, so we're looking to get insurance for next year. So just to sum up this slide, you know, the same thing for the prior year too. We've seen a bullish market here in the last couple of years, fast and furiously, as Marcus said early on. If we can go to the next slide. So getting into what's going on in the market and why are we seeing prices do what they do? Overall, the fundamentals that exist today are extremely tight. My opinion is that we'll probably see similar pricing next year at this time, maybe even worse. Supply and demand very tight, and the unfortunate thing is that there's no real solution on the table. There's nothing. We're not seeing more drilling being opened up, where I'll go through some of these factors. There's just nothing on the table that's proactively addressing the issues that we're seeing with rising prices in fuel. So first, geopolitical uncertainty. And I have a bullish and or bearish in parentheses under each one of these, and some of these are both. And I'll explain why. Well, that's just reality, but I'll explain where the bond bank program, what makes it very unique and special is that it accounts for the market can go either way. But geopolitical uncertainty is primarily what's going on with Russia and Europe, the sanctions going both ways. Currently, right now, that's extremely bullish on the marketplace. If there were peace, for instance, the geopolitical situation, if that were to ease up, would turn bearish. So that would be good for prices if you want them to go down. So as we sit right now, that's a bullish indicator, pushing prices, keeping them strong. But if that were to change down the road, you know, we're one peace accord, if you will, away. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but we're one peace accord away from seeing a significant bullish factor flip to a significant bearish factor. And again, not to assume anything. Bullish mean prices going up, bearish mean prices going down. We've seen demand depression here the last half a year or so. That's been bearish. And the reason we've seen demand depress is because prices have gotten so high. So we've seen a pullback in and people's driving habits, if you will, to a little bit degree. Interest rates, we are seeing a tightening, a reversal, if you will, of the loose monetary policies. Those are tightening up now. Energy, especially crude, has an inverse relationship. So if interest rates are getting tighter, that's a bullish factor on, a bearish factor on fuel, because again, it's economic related. If it becomes harder to get money, that will affect the economy, which in turn will likely lead to less use. So that's a bearish factor on the marketplace. Refining capacity is extremely short. This is something that I don't think is talked about enough. We have 50% less refining capacity in this country than we did in the 1980s. We have 2 less refineries in this country than we had 2 years ago. And I don't think we'll ever see a new refinery built in this country again. So that you add that to an already sensitive market, and you may have heard what happened up in White in Indiana. The BP refinery had an electrical fire. Now, good thing it only affected refining for a few days. They expect to have it up this weekend. But if that were to continue, and I don't think it will, but if it were to continue for a few weeks, you would see a huge spike in prices. There's just no cushion anymore in refining capacity. And like I said, I don't think we'll ever see a new one built. And that goes to that final point. And that's the Green Energy Initiative, which is extremely bullish on fossil fuels. Right now, the current administration believes that the future will be driven by clean energy. And so a lot of things we've seen here over the last few years are because of the Green Initiative. We are seeing a tightening of pipeline capacity. We talked about the refinery. We're seeing a tightening of drilling in favor of what's called the Green Initiative. Now, the spoiler alert there is and I'm not going to go too deep down this path, there is no such thing as clean energy. All energy is dirty. It's just a matter of where it's coming from, what's the price, and can it get to market. So to summarize here, overall, the bullish factors are extremely bullish, meaning prices will likely stay strong, if not go higher. However, there is some bearish things in the market that we talked about here that could push the market down, which again is what makes this program unique. So in the collar program, you have a cap. So if the prices do go up from these bullish factors, you're protected. However, if these bearish factors take root, unlike a straight fixed price, you have some participation in the downward market. If you remember that slide that Ron went over, it can be above the cap, you're going to get paid. It can be below the floor, you're going to have to pay the bond bank, or it'll be somewhere in between. But if you're below the cap and market's falling, you participate in that market versus being stuck in a high price should prices come down. So again, that's why this is probably, or is, in my opinion, the most unique and effective program to manage the fuel price risk. Next slide, Brian. So a couple days ago, these were prices on a collar as of August 29th. So this is for the year 2023. Diesel at a 405 cap and a 272 floor. Now the underlying price, that means that would be like a straight fixed price, is $3.24 a gallon. And to achieve that, you pay 15 cents a gallon to be part of that collar program. So you can see if the market's at 3.24 now, you have about 81 cents to the upside. If it goes over that, you'll get money back. You have about 52 cents do have 52 cents to the downside. So if those bearish indicators take root and prices start falling, you'll participate in that falling market, which obviously is good for your budget. And then the unleaded gasoline, the same thing, other than the prices are different. You have a $3.15 cap, a $2 floor. The underlying price or straight fixed price is $2.52, and that premium is 15 cents a gallon as well. Next slide. So just to summarize here, again, big picture, what are you getting for 15 cents? So for 15 cents a gallon, that's your insurance policy. You're protecting against all these things that are out of your control. None of us have control of what's going to go on in Russia and Europe. None of us can force a new refinery to be built in this country. You can argue for or against the green initiative, but it seems to be here to stay. And so you achieve protection on that. Again, not to beat a dead horse, but if those things don't happen, we talked about the interest rates, if there's an easing in geopolitical tension, or if for some reason the green initiative becomes more in balance with all energy and fossil fuels, you could see prices ease. But again, the bond bank program accounts for both sides. If the market goes up, you're protected. If the market goes down, you will participate, in this case, 50-something cents downward before you'd even hit that floor. So extreme amount of flexibility in this, and the best way and most economical way to manage your fuel budgets. And with that, I will turn it over back to Brian, who will talk about how you can partake in this program.
Thanks, John. Yeah, so just taking that time to bring it back to you all now. So we've talked about what the program is, how it works, and then just to continue this insurance analogy for the purposes of simplicity. So just like you would apply to an insurance company, they would collect information about you and go into that homeowner's insurance, collect information about the home. We do the same thing here, but we collect information about your entity and then your projected fuel budget and historical fuel consumption and fuel budget as well. Now, before I even kind of jump into some of that, Mark, if you don't mind dropping into the chat box or the Q&A, the first step for us would really be to complete what's called both a participation survey and a notice of intent to apply. And this is a real quick touch base point for us to let us know that you're at least interested in applying for the program. So at this point, it really is not it's a commitment-free thing. But once you click the link and it takes you to this survey, you'll see kind of some different items that you can select, but it essentially gives us the information to keep you in mind for this program, to start looking what that pool looks like. As I mentioned, the more people and more entities in this program, the more cost efficiencies we can achieve for you all. So this gives us an idea of who might be joining into the pool this year, and probably more importantly, will then allow us to send an application package to you. And what that application package will look like and the process from there on out. So just starting with the application. So we actually opened them up back in June to all folks who have participated in the program in the last year. But now is really that opening for any new entities that want to join. And you'll see there's step-by-step instructions. So you'll see a schedule, a timeline that looks like this in the package that we send you. And there's an application itself, which again is really just how much fuel you used in previous years and what your projection is for this year, and then information about your entity. We've worked so hard over the last 5 years in continuous improvement efforts, rapid improvement events, to really get this application as simple as possible. Right now, it is an Excel spreadsheet where a lot of the information is just kind of plug and play. So if you start to type in your consumption, will auto-calculate what your participation will look like in the program. And again, this is designed to make it as easy as possible. So again, you'll get that information from us if you complete the survey that Mark just dropped into the chat. Applications for the program are due on September 30th. There always is some flexibility there, but that helps us, again, kind of take that next step from, okay, here's a preliminary idea for us who's going to participate in the pool this year, to then having a more definitive amount of gallons that each entity is going to be hedging into the program. Once applications are in, that kind of kicks off the process where Dennis, who I'll introduce next, will get you going on the local approval side. Dennis will walk you through what that looks like. And of course, as we go through the process, we'll walk you through it then as well. November is when we will really kind of get to that closing point for the program. And I don't think it's on here, but up until this point, you will kind of get a better idea of what the market is looking like. And Ron will send out what's called a final confirmation of participation in the program. And at that point is when you will finally make that ultimate decision on whether you'll be participating in this next year's hedge. Give me just a moment to move this around. And then our goal for this year is to enter the hedge on or around November 10th, as close as we can get to that date. I'd say almost every year it fluctuates a little bit, but Ron, I see you unmuted yourself, so feel free to jump in. You might want to talk to the rationale behind that, or even just—
No, we just tried to have flexibility with the team here to determine the date. November 10th is a date that we kind of circle, but certainly hope to have this entered before Thanksgiving. But there's some, when you're dealing with the pool, there's a lot of factors. And then we're also going to keep a close track of the market, as you mentioned. And we're going to let you know a couple steps along the way, what the market is and what you're entering into. You're not just going to sign documents and enter into something and not know where we are. And then we have our team with us to answer any questions you have along the way. So, but again, the 10th is kind of our target date, but we might slide back just a little bit depending on participation and where we are with the pool.
Thanks, Ron. That actually, made me think to maybe step back just a second too. If it wasn't clear by the examples that we were showing, and this is where it is different than your typical insurance policy. This is something that we enter into once every year. So it's not the kind of program where applications are accepted on a rolling basis. And that, again, is so that everybody is included in this one pool for that cost efficiency purpose. And then that hedge, once we set in November, will be in effect as of January 2023 and run through December of 2023. So it is a calendar year type of program. And again, this kind of allows us to, the best we can anticipate the market, but it gives us that timing and flexibility to be prepared to have it go into effect by January 1st, which is when your protection would kick in. And just kind of on that, especially because we have so many new folks here, if there's questions about what percentage you want to hedge, or what it looks like the first year in participation. First, I know that there's many existing participants who would love to talk with you about the program and what it looks like. But even just from a first year perspective, if you're looking to test it, you definitely do not have to hedge 80 to 100% of the gallons that you would be projecting out for next year. There's always the option to start at a smaller amount just to see how the program performs for you, so you get a sense. Now, there's reasons that 80% to 100% is kind of that threshold mark that we aim for, but certainly there's flexibility in all of that. And one thing that might be an option, especially for new entities this year, on that participation survey, you'll see an option to schedule a time after this webinar to speak with our team. And that's where we can really talk about more if this program is right for you and kind of, again, walk you through next steps. But I know that, especially for someone who's never worked in local government before, this is probably the most confusing part for me, which is that local legal process. And so thankfully, I mentioned we've got legal experts on the call as well. And Dennis, I'm going to turn it over to you to give everyone here on the call an idea of what that local approval process looks like in your role that you play with the field budgeting program.
Thanks a lot, Brian. And you mentioned confusing. That is something I think that we've striven over the years in this program, and I've been working on it with this team since it started back in 2009. And Brian, I think you alluded to this earlier. There have been efficiencies and some streamlining that's taken place more recently, and I think that we've really got it streamlined now to try to make this as simple as we can and not as burdensome to the participants, and also avoid any confusion. And like Brian mentioned, as we go through the approval process, we are all here for questions or comments you may have. And when we do the approval process here, I'm going to talk about it. One of the things that I like to do is I'll actively reach out. I will call the clerk treasurers or the town managers or the controllers or the business managers just to make sure they've received documents, that we are on track. One of the key things in our role here on the legal side is make sure that we're following along the timeline to make sure that folks are able to get their approvals in and they can all participate, and we keep with the schedule. And we understand there's always going to be bumps in the road, meetings get canceled, things like that, but we've almost always been able to accommodate, I think, just about everyone's schedule to get them in on a timely manner. So let's, Brian, if you could flip to the next slide here. So how does this process work? Brian mentioned the filing of the application, and I know Ron touched on this as well. Once the application is received by the bond bank, we will then, that'll be reviewed by them, and then it'll be forwarded to us as legal counsel. At that point, we start the approving document. And what's important to know, whether you're a school, a county, a town, a city, or other municipal corporation that's participating, all that's required to be adopted is a resolution. So this is not an ordinance. It's not subject to a 2-meeting requirement unless your local rules require that, and some do. For the cities and towns that participate, those with a Board of Public Works, will also have a resolution for them to approve as well. And what that resolution basically does is it authorizes participation in the program, authorizes the officials, so for example, the mayor and controller or the superintendent and business manager, to execute the documents for the program. It approves a form of what we call the Qualified Entity Reimbursement Agreement. That this is basically the legal document that spells out all the rights and obligations of the party. So is John and Ron were sort of talking through the program about how the hedge works, and in some instances, there may be payments flowing to the participants, which we hope to be the case. And in other instances, there may be a payment that needs to flow from the participants to the bond bank. But this is the document that really outlines how that works. Sometimes we get comments on these documents, and we try to accommodate them as best we can. But as you might imagine, with this being a program, one of the key elements of it is consistency. So we always strive to keep the resolutions of the participants nearly identical, and the agreements nearly identical. So everyone is singing off of the same songbook, so to speak. And it's important not just for the bond bank and the participants, but also for the counterparties that the bond bank is entering into. This helps the process to get that approval and to get the best rate locked in place and the best terms set up. So we will send that resolution out to the participants, and I believe on the application, unless it's changed, there's a provision in there to say, when are your meeting dates? And we'll always try to hit your regular meeting dates, and we make sure to get these resolutions to you by your filing deadline. So if you have a week in advance filing deadline for your council, we'll get it to you a week in advance. But we always try to hit the next meeting date. And Brian, let's go to the next slide. So once the resolution's received, it'll need to be adopted by the legislative bodies. So town council for towns, common council for cities, school board of trustees for schools, county council for counties. It just depends on the entity. We've had just about every type of entity run through this program, and including some state entities. There's no public hearing required, so this really just needs to go on the agenda. And my experience has been that most of the participants, by the time they get to this stage, they understand the program, they're comfortable with it, they'll adopt the resolution. And I always like to say, you're not bound to participate in the program at this point. You know, you're not bound until we get closer to the closing date. And Ron, correct me if I'm wrong, but prior to closing a few days before, you'll send out a kind of a confirmation sheet. Is that right? Where folks
will send a confirmation with the range in which we will be entering into the hedge. We'll also show all the cost and the breakdown monthly of gallons in which the entity is participating.
Yeah.
So it'll all be on this confirm.
Yeah. So you can go So the idea is if you're interested, you can go through this process. And that's the point what Ron mentioned, right towards the end there is when you'll actually be locked in. So we'll gather up the resolutions, and a big part of what we're doing on our end on the legal side is trying to answer your questions. If your local attorney has questions, we talk with them quite a bit, and we make sure that your local counsel is copied on all of these documents. And we'll gather up those resolutions. We'll get them back from you. And another nice recent development is we do this all electronically. You're welcome to send us originals, but we are in the space age now, I'd like to say, where we're all relying on scans or DocuSign or whatever you have authorized. So that works for us, and that has really helped to expedite this process and work around people's schedules, especially when we had our COVID years there. But once we have all the approvals in, and we get, I think if I'm looking at the schedule here, we're in towards the end of October, we get towards that pricing stage. Ron will send out that confirmation schedule that he just mentioned, and we'll have a couple closing certificates to sign, to have signed by the participants. One's just a general certificate, and then one's a certificate of your counsel. We'll get those signatures back and the signature on the final agreement. And on the legal side, we'll be done at that point. I have a checklist I prepare for each of the entities, and I share that with the bond bank's attorney, and we prepare these documents and we provide them to all the participants in the group ahead of closing. And at that point, we're done. The bond bank then closes and working with Maverick Energy to lock in the price. And at that point, we'll finalize the transcript and we'll email it out to each of the participants. And that's it. So it's a pretty straightforward process. And we're always available post-closing, I'll call it, if folks have questions about how it works. But Ron, correct me if I'm wrong. I mean, typically, I think you all are available and you're the ones that working monthly with the participants. And
Right.
gosh, it's seldom that you call, but I know every once in a while we have something come up.
Yeah, we provide settlement information every month. If nothing happens, if it's within the collar or below the cap, this year we just send an email. But if there's settlement, we send you the settlement information where we settled, and you should be getting a payment from our paying agent.
Okay. Yeah, so that's it. And then one last thing, with the various meetings, I always like to ask each participant, do you want someone there from the team? A lot of the qualified entities that have participated before, they know this process, everything looks and feels the same. But when we have a new participant, they may have questions, and we're more than happy to attend the meeting and help walk through the process. And if a presentation is necessary, we're more than happy to do that. But that's it. Ron, I will turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you, Dennis. And I will say that we have worked to make this program streamlined. So if you do have any questions, feel free to reach out to any of us. We'll be happy to answer your questions to make sure that it goes as smoothly as possible. Because if you have questions or need us to come do a presentation, we'll be happy to do so. So at this point, we're going to quickly go through some frequently asked questions. Most of these have been covered, but I will cover them again. If I participate in the bond bank's fuel budgeting program, where do I purchase my fuel? We don't change how you purchase the fuel. You'll continue to purchase fuel just like you did beforehand. So you just purchase it from your vendor, just like before. The next question is, what are the advantages of using the bond bank's fuel program? And Brian has mentioned it acts like insurance. It protects you from rising fuel prices. That is what the fuel budgeting program does, is just to keep your budget in check when price of fuel goes up. Will the bond bank audit your fuel consumption? No, we don't need your invoices. We don't need to know how much fuel you consume. That is separate. What we will use is the application and your comm firm to determine how much participation is in the program. So anything that happens after you're in the program, that is separate from participating in the bond bank's program. Next slide, please.
Hey, Ron,
Yes.
could I sorry for interrupting. I want to go back to that first question about where does the participant buy their fuel from?
Mhm.
I want to I don't think that can be stressed enough. You know, since we've been doing this since 2009, it never fails that often a participant will not come into it because there was a misunderstanding on the fuel piece. I'm not sure if there's any transportation department people on here, or if it's just, you know, all the business managers, but oftentimes I've seen where, and I understand it, you know, from the transportation department side, they're very concerned about where the fuel's coming from, what kind of blend is it, you know, because they have a garage there and they're making sure those engines run. So that's like the holy grail to my understanding. Anytime a bad piece of fuel gets into an engine, it's not only maybe not getting good gas mileage, but it may do something to the engine itself, which causes a lot of problems. So this is one of the greatest things about this program. And you buy the fuel, how you're buying it, type of blend you're buying, however you like, however you're doing it now, you continue to do that. I can't stress it enough. So please, 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 if you're getting that type of pushback from your transportation department, please ask us. We'll go through it again for you. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Brian, next slide, please. Thank you. And here is the last of the frequently asked questions. And again, at the end of this presentation, we'll be happy to answer any other questions that you have. Can I participate if I fix my price with my vendor? And the answer is, if you are fixing your price with your vendor, you're doing essentially what this program does. Now, keep in mind that we are transparent with all of our costs in this program, and we're transparent, and it costs 15 cents per gallon. So if you're fixing your price, you will be happy to have Maverick go through and look at what they think is in that fixed price, and they'll help you try and break that down, because there is a cost to fixing your price with your jobber. But if you participate in our program, it is transparent what our costs are. It is transparent what our NYMEX trades every month. So with that, do you want to add anything, John?
Yeah, I would add to that. What you're saying is very true, that what we've seen too since 2009 is sometimes there can be very aggressive pushback on this program to the entity from their physical supplier or jobber, whatever you want to call them. And there shouldn't be. If you like your jobber, keep your jobber. You don't have to change them. They're still doing business with you. You'll be buying from them on a floating market price, index price, if you will. But I think maybe that's where the rub comes in, because sometimes I've seen it over the years where there's still big pushback from the transportation department, which I think is coming from the jobber. I believe that's because the jobber would rather just fix a price, and they don't want to lose that ability to do so because they can make more money in a fixed price. And then going back to what I said earlier, a fixed price is not as good as this program because you have the flexibility to the downside should the market fall off. So again, this is the most cost economical and most flexible way to hedge that program. So if you like your jobber, keep your jobber. The fuel blends can stay the same. And if there is pushback from that side, please reach out and we can talk about it.
Thank you, John. Next page, Brian. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mark. And then I think after that, we're going to ask for if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ron. And I'll answer this question live from Matt Doublestein. Matt, good to see you virtually again. It's been a little bit of time. Great question from Matt. So how the settlement works, is it between the bond bank, we got our floor cap that we set at the beginning of the year, as Brian said, and it rolls through those 12 months. And you're right, Matt, we will settle against an index. So this really is a financial paper transaction. We're not concerned, as John said, with what you're actually paying your particular vendor, what blend you have, where you get that fuel, or how you get that fuel. This is really for your budget, whether you're in Excel or more fancy budgeting spreadsheet. This really allows you to know that, okay, we've budgeted X for fuel. And then as that market goes across the year, we're protected. We don't have to borrow from another fund. And so I hope that answers your question, Matt. But yeah, we don't come in and say, okay, let's audit you and see, you said you estimated 10,000 gallons this month. Did you use 9,900 or 11,000? And how much did you actually pay for those? You continue to operate and run that side of the business the way you've always run it. And this is just based on your projected use and what you've participated in the program with. We look at the index, which we use as a representation for what we think the market is, and go from there.
What I would add to that, as long as you're on a floating market price mechanism with your jobber physical fuel supplier, if the market's going up, their price is going to go up. Not necessarily to a 1-to-1 ratio, but it's going to be going up. If the market goes down, their price is going to be going down. Also, too, we should have mentioned, and if we, maybe we did and I missed it, but those prices that we're talking about, those are NYMEX prices. So that is not a pump equivalent. So that is, to get to a pump equivalent, you'd have to add, mostly it's tax that's not in there. And you'd have some, small local delivery pieces and maybe blend differentials in there. So probably somewhere between, depending on your tax and how you're being taxed on it, somewhere between, 35 and 50 cents you would add to that. That would get you to a pump equivalent.
Thank you, John. It's a great clarification. So it's a good proxy, as John said, not 1-to-1, but a good proxy for what you're seeing out there. I love our webinar. I love working with everybody because you're good and you're on it. And we've heard from a couple of people in the Q&A in the chat that the link, God bless Zoom. Zoom is hyperlinking. We're dropping in the actual full link and there's a dash at the end. And when Zoom is hyperlinking it, it's doing that automatically. And for some reason, it's hyperlinking everything except that little dash at the end. So if you use your cursor, your mouse, and copy and paste the full thing that Brian dropped in the Q&A or the chat, you'll get to the participation survey. If you just click the hyperlink, it'll send you to a 404, a dead page, because it doesn't have that last dash. And you may have seen our faces. We've been trying to mess with that during the legal portion. Sorry, Dennis. But haven't been able to figure out how to kind of do an end around on that. So, and Brian will send it out with a real officially working hyperlink after this webinar, but did want to thanks everybody for actually interacting with the stuff that we put on there. So a couple of you have mentioned the link is defective. We've checked it. It's actually working. It's just, for some reason, the hyperlink isn't getting picked up by Zoom. So.
Hey, Mark, this is Ron. If you think of a question afterwards, don't hesitate to answer. Our email is real simple. It's fuel, F-U-E-L at iambondbank.com. And Brian, do you want to put that in the chat? Mm-hmm. And then you can send us any questions that come after the fact. If you need any information, application, any clarification, please email that and we'll be glad to send it to you.
Yeah, and again, just feel free to use that participation survey to ask us to reach out to you, schedule time to talk. That's an option as well. So
I'll just pause maybe for any questions in the Q&A. We've got just a couple minutes here. Pause for a couple questions in the Q&A. I think what's neat about this is I joined the bond bank 5 years ago, learned about the program, and do some more learning. And you realize this is a tool that's used by big players like Southwest Airlines, big proponent of hedging fuel risk from a financial side. You think about airlines, how much fuel they use, and we're able to kind of be the only thing in Indiana that makes this tool accessible to, gosh, we've got some very small school districts, some small towns that participate. And so we're creating collectively this market access that, the INDOTs and the Southwest Airlines and these big guys are able to use to protect their budgets, and bringing sophisticated tools like that to small local units of government in Indiana is exactly what we're here for, to create market access where you individually if you try to go out and do this individually, it just wouldn't work because you wouldn't have the individual gallonage. So Again, we do gas and diesel, and you may participate in one, but not the other, depending on what your fleets use. And I don't see any other additional questions, so I will wrap it up and just say thank you for your time, your participation, your attention, everything. I want to thank the team from Maverick, John and Russ, from Bose McKinney and Evans, Dennis, and of course the Bond Bank team who puts it all together, Brian and Ron. So please encourage you to check out, look for the slide deck, the participation survey, and we look forward to talking to each and every one of you at a later date. Let's have a great 2023 field budgeting program. Thank you all. Have a good afternoon.